The day I sold my company for $43 million, the sky over San Francisco looked exactly the same as it had 30 years ago. Fog sliding lazily between buildings, the bay breathing in slow silver waves, but I was not the same man. 30 years earlier, I had stood in a garage with 2 broken laptops, a folding table, and an idea no one believed in. I named the company after my late wife, Eliner Systems, because she was the only one who ever believed I could build something from nothing. I worked 18-hour days. I missed anniversaries. I missed school plays. I missed my son's 8th birthday because a server cluster failed during a product launch. The divorce had been quiet. Elinor never screamed. She just grew tired of loving a man who was always chasing something invisible. When she passed away 3 years later from a sudden aneurysm, I told myself the company would be my apology to her. I would make it worth the sacrifice, and somehow, impossibly, it was. That morning, lawyers from Goldman Sachs finalized the acquisition papers. The buyer was a global firm expanding into AI infrastructure. They congratulated me, shook my hand, and said words like asterisk, visionary asterisk, and asterisk, legacy asterisk. $43 million after taxes, after distributions, after everything, enough to retire comfortably. Enough to rest, but wealth wasn't what I felt when the wire confirmation came through. What I felt was relief and pride, because the one person I had done it all for, my son, would never have to struggle the way I did. Daniel Hale, the center of my universe, I had raised him alone after Elinor died, packed his lunches, sat in hospital waiting rooms when he broke his arm at 12, drove him to coding camps, paid for Stanford University without blinking. He was brilliant, ambitious, sharp like a blade, and tonight I wanted to celebrate with him. I called him immediately. "Son," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "it's done." There was a pause on the line, then excitement. 43, he asked. 43, he laughed, a rich, satisfied laugh. "That's incredible, Dad. We have to celebrate. We." He meant himself and his wife, Sophia. Sophia had entered our lives 3 years ago. She was graceful, intelligent, always impeccably dressed. She had a smile that made strangers trust her instantly. But with me, she was polite, not warm, not cold. Just measured, still, Daniel loved her, and that was enough for me. I told them I'd handle everything. There was only one place worthy of the occasion, Le Jardin Noir, the best restaurant in the city, impossible to get into without a 3-month wait. Candle-lit tables, crystal chandeliers, live string quartet, French tasting menus that cost more than my first apartment's rent. The maitre d' recognized my name from the reservation deposit alone. "Congratulations, Mr. Hale," he said smoothly. "Your private table is ready." That night, I wore the navy suit Elinor had once said made me look dangerously successful. I hadn't worn it in years. Daniel arrived first. He hugged me tightly, tighter than he had in a long time. "I'm proud of you," he said. Those 4 words erased decades of exhaustion. Sophia followed, gliding toward us in a silk emerald dress that shimmered under the chandeliers. She kissed my cheek. "Congratulations, Arthur. This is extraordinary." We sat. Wine was poured. A 1998 Bordeaux the sommelier recommended with reverence. The lights were low. The room glowed gold. Daniel kept glancing around, impressed. "You really went all out," he said. "I wanted tonight to be special," I replied, "for us. Our food arrived in delicate courses, seared scallops, truffle risotto, wagyu so tender it melted before chewing. We toasted 3 times to hard work, to family, to new beginnings. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me. "So what's next, Dad?" "I'm thinking of stepping back. Maybe travel, maybe mentor startups, maybe finally sleep 8 hours. Sophia smiled, but her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. "That sounds wise," she said. "You deserve rest." Daniel nodded eagerly. "You've carried everything for so long. It's time to let someone else help manage things. Something about the phrasing lingered in the air. Help manage things, I waved it off. They were young, practical, financial planning mattered. The music shifted, a slow violin melody filling the room. Daniel stood and extended his hand to Sophia. Dance with me. She laughed softly. Always. They moved toward the center of the floor, beneath the grand chandelier. I watched them sway, my son tall, confident, successful. His wife elegant, radiant, my family, my legacy. For a moment, I felt something rare and fragile. Peace. I lifted my glass of fresh, pressed juice. I decided to avoid more wine and took a small sip. Sweet, slightly bitter at the end, probably pomegranate. I set it down and kept watching them dance. Daniel whispered something into Sophia's ear. She smiled. Then, without warning, a shadow fell across my table. I looked up. A security guard stood beside me, mid-40s, steady eyes, uncomfortable posture. "Sir," he said quietly. "Yes," he leaned closer, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "I don't mean to alarm you." My heartbeat slowed, strangely calm. "But I saw the gentleman you're with pour something into your juice while you were in the restroom." Everything inside me went still. The music continued. The violin climbed higher. Daniel's hand rested gently at Sophia's waist as they turned beneath the light. "I must be mistaken," I said automatically. The guard shook his head. "I've worked here 12 years. I know what I saw." He took a small vial from his jacket pocket, emptied it into your glass. My eyes shifted to the table, the juice half full, untouched since that single sip. I felt no dizziness, no weakness, just a cold awareness spreading through my chest. "Why are you telling me?" I asked. "Because I have a father," he replied simply. And something about the way he did it didn't sit right with me. On the dance floor, Daniel caught my eye and smiled. The same smile he wore when he was 6 years old and showed me a drawing he was proud of. My mind tried to reject the possibility. Not Daniel, not my son, the man I raised, the boy who cried when our dog died, the young adult who held my hand at his mother's funeral. Impossible, and yet the guard stepped back. "I suggest you don't drink that," he said quietly, "and maybe leave. On the night of my greatest triumph, I looked at my son again. He spun Sophia gently. She laughed. They looked like love. They looked like innocence, but suddenly, something in Daniel's eyes seemed sharper, focused, calculating. My heart began to pound. I stood slowly. No one noticed. I picked up the juice glass with a napkin and slipped it into my coat pocket. I placed enough cash on the table to cover the bill twice over, and without a word, without a confrontation, without a scene, I walked toward the exit. The violin reached its crescendo behind me. The doors of Le Jardin Noir closed softly as I stepped into the cold night air of San Francisco. I stood on the sidewalk, breathing hard. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Daniel, I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, everything would change. The night air outside *** Le Jard, in Noir ***, felt colder than it should have. Or maybe it was just me. My hands trembled as I reached my car. The city lights of San Francisco, shimmering like nothing in the world, had changed. Traffic moved. Laughter echoed from nearby bars. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. Normal. Everything was painfully normal, except my son had just poisoned me. I sat in the driver's seat, but didn't start the engine. My phone vibrated again. Daniel, then a text. * Dad, where did you go? * Another buzz. * Are you okay? * Another. * We're worried. * I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Worried. The word felt almost mocking. I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and slowly removed the juice glass from my coat pocket. Even in the dim streetlight, I could see faint residue swirling near the bottom. My mind tried desperately to build alternative explanations. A misunderstanding, a prank, a mistake, but deep down, beneath denial, a cold realization began to form. Daniel had been asking strange questions for months, about my will, about asset structures, about cognitive decline in older founders. "Dad, you should think about succession planning. Dad, what happens if something unexpected happens to you? Dad, maybe it's time to let me help manage things. I had thought it was concern. Now it sounded like preparation. I turned the key in the ignition and drove not home, but downtown, toward the old office building that once housed Illinois Systems before we scaled into a high rise. Even after the acquisition earlier that day, I still had access. Old habits die hard. The building loomed quiet and dark. I parked in the underground garage and used my access card. The security lights flickered on as I stepped inside. The silence felt safer than my own home. I went straight to the small internal lab we once used for hardware testing. We had basic chemical testing kits, nothing forensic grade, but enough to identify common compounds. My hands steadied as procedure replaced emotion. I poured a small sample onto a testing strip, waited. Watched the color shifted, then deepened. Benzodiazepine class sedative, strong, fast-acting, enough to cause disorientation within minutes. Unconsciousness shortly after, my throat tightened. If I had finished that glass, they could have said I fainted. They could have called an ambulance. They could have told doctors I'd been confused lately. Memory lapses. Fatigue, age, and in California, with the right documentation, temporary conservatorship could be arranged quickly if someone appeared mentally compromised. Conservatorship, control of my finances, my companies, my newly wired $43 million. I sank into a chair. The room felt smaller. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated. Daniel was many things, but reckless wasn't one of them, which meant this had been planned. For how long? My phone buzzed again, this time Sophia. *Arthur, please answer. Daniel is panicking. *panic, interesting. If they believed I had drunk the full glass, they'd expect symptoms by now: confusion, dizziness, collapse. Instead, I was sitting in my old lab, fully conscious, and thinking more clearly than I had in years. I opened my laptop, logged into my personal banking dashboard. The acquisition funds had cleared $43 million distributed across several accounts. Everything appeared untouched, but then I checked something else. The Hale Family Trust. I'd created it 10 years ago when Daniel finished college. A protective structure, simple at first, meant to streamline inheritance and tax planning. Daniel was listed as co-trustee. A decision I once considered responsible. Now my pulse quickened. There it was. 3 weeks ago, amendments had been drafted. Digital copies uploaded. I opened the documents. Language about medical incapacitation. Temporary financial authority transfer. Emergency, asset management clauses. My signature was present, scanned, not forged, but lifted from prior documents and digitally embedded. Sophisticated, legal enough to create confusion. I leaned back slowly. They had been preparing, not just tonight. For weeks, maybe months, a memory surfaced. 2 months ago, Daniel insisted I meet with a family attorney to review estate updates. I had canceled the meeting due to a last-minute investor call. He'd seemed disappointed. Now I understood why. I rubbed my face with trembling hands. How does a father process this? There is betrayal in business, there is betrayal in marriage, but betrayal from your child feels biological, like something tearing at your DNA. I stood and paced the lab, no anger yet, just disbelief and something worse, grief, because in that restaurant, watching him dance under the chandelier, I had felt proud. Whole, complete, and now that memory felt contaminated, my phone rang again. Daniel, I answered this time. Dad, his voice rushed through, strained. Where are you? You just disappeared. I wasn't feeling well, I said evenly. A pause. How do you feel now? The question was too sharp, too precise. Better, I replied, just needed air. Another pause. Did you drink your juice? He asked. The words landed heavy. There it is, the confirmation. Yes, I lied calmly. Why? No reason, he said quickly. You just seemed flushed earlier. Flushed, I closed my eyes. I'm heading home. I continued, we'll talk tomorrow. Dad, but I ended the call. Silence returned. He had expected me to be unconscious by now. That meant whatever he gave me should have acted quickly. Which meant they were probably still at the restaurant, waiting, watching the clock. I walked to the window overlooking the dark city. My city, built with my hands, protected for my family, and nearly stolen in one quiet, elegant act. For the first time that night, anger flickered, small, controlled, cold. If Daniel wanted control of my life, if he believed I was old, naive, predictable, then he had underestimated the one lesson I had mastered over 30 years in business: never react emotionally. Strategize. I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls, first to my private attorney, second to my cybersecurity director, third to a forensic accountant who owed me more than one favor. I didn't explain everything yet, just enough. I need discretion, I said, and speed. By midnight, temporary holds were placed on key accounts. By 1 a.m., password protocols were changed. By 2 a.m., legal notifications were drafted to freeze trust amendments pending review. Daniel would wake up tomorrow expecting a weakened father. Instead, he would face something else entirely. I looked down at the test strip again, positive, definitive. My son had tried to sedate me, not out of desperation. But calculation, I should have felt broken. Instead, something hardened inside me, because 20 minutes earlier I had walked out of a restaurant confused. Now I walked out of that lab certain. This wasn't just betrayal, this was war, and I had built an empire from nothing. If Daniel believed he could outmaneuver me, he had forgotten who taught him how to play the game. By the time the sun rose over San Francisco, I had not slept. But I had made a decision. If my son believed I was old, fragile, and easily maneuvered, then I would give him exactly what he expected. A disappearing father, at 8:17 a.m., Daniel called again. I let it ring twice before answering. Dad. His voice sounded carefully controlled now. How are you feeling this morning? I waited a beat too long before replying. I'm all right, I said slowly. A little foggy silence, then foggy how, as if he were checking symptoms on a list. Oh, you know, I muttered. Just tired, must have been the wine. You didn't drink much wine, he corrected quickly. I almost smiled. You remember that? Another pause. Yes, he said. I remember. Of course he did, because he had been watching. I think, I continued carefully, maybe I should see a doctor, just to be safe. That's a good idea. He replied immediately. Too immediately. Sophia knows a specialist, very discreet. Discreet. I ended the call and stared at the ceiling of my bedroom. 30 years building a company, one night dismantling an illusion. The hardest part wasn't the legal maneuvering. It was the performance, because what I was about to do required something I had never done well. Act weak. The foundation before noon. I met with my attorney, Margaret Ellis, a woman sharper than broken glass and loyal beyond reason. I want to transfer the majority of my liquid assets, I told her, sliding a folder across her desk, into a new irrevocable charitable foundation. She didn't blink. To whom? The Eleanor Hale Foundation. I said my wife's name deliberately. It steadied me. For what purpose? Funding young entrepreneurs who can't afford capital, especially first-generation founders. Margaret studied me carefully. This isn't just philanthropy, she said quietly. This is protection. Yes, she nodded once. Then we move immediately. By the end of the day, $40 million began transferring into protected charitable structures beyond the reach of personal trustees. Daniel would still see money in my accounts, but the heart of it, the legacy, would no longer be accessible. If he intended to seize control of my finances through incapacity claims, he would find very little left to control. The first performance that evening, Daniel and Sophia came to my house. I opened the door slowly, leaning slightly against the frame. Daniel rushed forward. Dad, you look pale. I didn't sleep well, I said, letting my voice drift. Sophia stepped inside gracefully, her eyes scanning the room, assessing, always assessing. Arthur, maybe you should sit down. I allowed Daniel to guide me to the couch. His hands felt different now, not protective, positioning. I had a strange moment this morning. I said softly. Forgot where I left my phone. Daniel and Sophia exchanged a quick glance. Subtle, but I saw it. That can happen with stress. Sophia offered gently. Big life changes, the sale, the celebration. Yes, Daniel added, sitting across from me. You've been under pressure for years. He leaned forward. Dad, have you ever considered setting up a formal medical evaluation just to have a baseline? There it was. The move. I let confusion cloud my expression. Why would I need that? Just precaution. He said smoothly. In case anything happens, it protects everyone. Protects everyone. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was convincing. If I didn't know the truth, I might have agreed right there. I'll think about it, I murmured. Sophia smiled softly, too softly. They stayed another hour. During that time, I misplaced my glasses twice, intentionally. Repeated a question, paused mid-sentence as if searching for a word. Daniel's concern visibly shifted into something else. Confidence, when they finally left, I watched them from the upstairs window. They didn't know I had security cameras recording audio near the driveway. Daniel's voice carried clearly. He's slipping, he said quietly. Sophia's reply was colder. Then we need to move before he changes anything. I closed my eyes. There it was, confirmation, not doubt, not fear, strategy. Hash, hash, hash the disappearance over the next 2 weeks. I slowly withdrew. Cancelled meetings, missed calls, let emails go unanswered. I posted a vague message to my professional network about stepping back for health reasons. Daniel stepped in publicly. He began answering inquiries on my behalf. He met with former executives. He subtly positioned himself as the inevitable successor. Behind the scenes, my legal team was building something else entirely. We obtained security footage from **Le Jardin Noir **. Clear as daylight, Daniel removing a small vial from his jacket, pouring it into my glass, Sophia watching. Not stopping him, we ran toxicology confirmation on the residue, documented chain of custody, prepared criminal filings not yet submitted, but ready. The foundation was finalized, the will rewritten, every asset insulated. If Daniel succeeded in proving incapacity, he would inherit almost nothing. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't only about money. It was about truth, about teaching one final lesson. Hash, hash, hash the cracks one evening. Daniel arrived alone. He looked tired, stressed. Dad, he said, sitting at the kitchen table, we're worried about you. I forget things sometimes. I replied absently, staring at my untouched tea. You left the stove on yesterday. I did, yes, a lie. There were sensors, alerts, cameras. I knew exactly what had been on or off. He leaned closer. Dad, if something happens to you without legal clarity, the state can step in. That could freeze everything. Everything. There it was again. I looked at him slowly. Everything. Our accounts, the trust, your shares, your shares. Not your health, not your safety. Your shares, for a brief moment, just a flicker. I saw something in his eyes. Not hatred, not even malice, fear, debt fear, desperation fear, and beneath it all entitlement. He believed it was already his. That my life was a temporary inconvenience between him and control. Daniel, I said quietly, do you love me? The question caught him off guard. Of course I do. Even if I lose everything. He hesitated, only for a fraction of a second, but long enough. Dad, that's not realistic. I nodded slowly. You're right. I whispered it wasn't realistic, because he had already decided I was expendable. Hash, hash, hash the final preparation that night. I made the call, filed the report. I told Margaret. There was silence on the other end. Are you certain? Yes. The next move would not be subtle, but neither was attempted poisoning. Over the following days, I withdrew further. Stopped answering Daniel entirely. Let him believe his plan was advancing. Behind the curtain, the investigation formally began. And I prepared something else. An invitation, one more dinner, same restaurant, same table, same chandelier. But this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative, because the disappearing father was only the first act. And when I finally reappeared, it would not be as a victim. It would be as a reckoning. 3 weeks after the night that split my life in two, I called my son. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady now, no tremor, no fog, no hesitation. "Let's have dinner, just us, like before." There was a pause. Then cautious relief. "You're feeling better." "I am." Sophia insisted on coming as well. Of course she did. I booked the same table at *** Le Jardin Noir ***, the same chandelier, the same violinist, the same polished marble floors reflecting candlelight like quiet stars. When I arrived, I was not leaning on anything, not weak, not confused, just composed. Daniel noticed immediately. "You look good, Dad." "I feel good," I replied. Sophia studied me carefully, her smile thin and elegant. We sat. Wine was poured again. I ordered juice, the same kind. I saw Daniel's fingers tighten slightly around his glass. Good, let him remember. Dinner unfolded with strained politeness. Daniel spoke about future planning. Sophia mentioned asset structuring. I let them talk. Let them believe this was reconciliation. Then I stood. The room softened as the violinist shifted to a slow melody. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced. Other diners turned politely. Crystal glasses paused midair. I lifted mine, to family. I began. Daniel smiled faintly, to trust. Sophia nodded, and to lessons. My tone changed just slightly. Daniel's smile faltered. "There is one lesson I learned the night I sold my company for $43 million. I continued calmly. "It's this: success doesn't reveal who stands beside you." I looked directly at my son. "It reveals who is waiting for you to fall." Silence spread across the table. Sophia's posture stiffened. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Dad," he said quietly, "what is this?" I reached into my jacket pocket and removed a small remote. Behind us, near the private dining wall, a screen flickered to life. I had arranged it with management beforehand. The room dimmed slightly. The footage began, clear, undeniable. Daniel removing a vial from his jacket, pouring its contents into my juice. Sophia watching, not stopping him. Gasps rippled through nearby tables. The violin stopped mid-note. Daniel went pale. "That's not," he began. "It is," I said softly. The footage replayed from another angle. "Slow motion, precise. You thought I drank it." I continued. "You expected me to collapse." Sophia stood abruptly. "Arthur, we can explain." "I already understand." My voice never rose. That was the power of it. I tested the liquid, benzodiazepine, enough to sedate a man of my age within minutes. Daniel's chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I placed a thin folder on the table. Inside, toxicology results, bank records, trust amendments with suspicious timestamps. I also know about the conservatorship clauses. I said quietly, "The digital signature overlays, the emergency transfer language." His face drained of color. Sophia's composure fractured completely. "You were supposed to be slipping," she whispered before she could stop herself. There it was, the truth. Daniel turned toward her sharply, but it was too late. I continued, my tone calm as still water. "You underestimated two things." I ticked them off slowly. My intelligence and my patience. At that exact moment, the restaurant doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside. Not dramatic, not rushed, just inevitable. Daniel looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in weeks. "You called the police?" "Yes." His eyes filled, but not with regret, with disbelief. "You're choosing money over your own son." I held his gaze. "No, I'm choosing my life." Silence, heavy, final. "You tried to take it before I was done living it." Sophia began to cry, not softly, but desperately. Daniel's voice cracked. "We were in debt." He said, "You don't understand the pressure. Investors were threatening lawsuits. We thought, you thought." I interrupted gently that I was an obstacle. He said nothing, because he couldn't deny it. The officers approached. They asked him to stand. He looked at me one last time. Somewhere beneath the ambition, Beneath the greed, I saw the little boy who once held my hand crossing the street. And for a brief, unbearable second, my heart broke. But betrayal changes something fundamental. It redraws bloodlines. I would have helped you, I said quietly. All you had to do was ask. The words seemed to hit him harder than the handcuffs. They escorted Daniel and Sophia toward the exit. Whispers filled the room. Phones recorded. Reputations shifted in real time. I remained standing until the doors closed behind them. The restaurant manager approached carefully. "Mr. Hale, are you all right?" I exhaled slowly. For the first time in weeks, I replied, yes. The screen behind me went dark. I picked up my untouched glass of juice, held it for a moment, then set it down. Not tonight. Outside, the night air of San Francisco felt different than it had 3 weeks ago. Colder but clearer. I stood on the same sidewalk where I had once walked out, confused and wounded. Now I stood steady. The Eleanor Hale Foundation was active. $40 million already allocated to young founders who would build dreams honestly. My will was rewritten, my assets protected, my name intact, but the victory felt quiet, because revenge, even when justified, carries weight. I had not destroyed my son. He had done that himself. I simply refused to let him destroy me. As I walked toward my car, my phone buzzed with notifications. News spreading, markets reacting, lawyers calling, but I ignored all of it. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking like a CEO. I wasn't thinking like a strategist. I was thinking like a man who had survived something deeply personal. I looked up at the sky. Eleanor, I whispered. I kept it safe. The fortune, the legacy, the life. And though my heart would never be untouched again, I had learned the final lesson of success. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't building an empire. It's protecting your soul from the people who would sell it, and this time I chose myself.